Under the burning sun, a luxury car stood stranded, its owner, a millionaire, frustrated and helpless. Then came a young black boy, his clothes dusty, his heart pure. Without hesitation, he knelt to help a stranger far richer than himself. But what happened after that moment, no one could have imagined. Stay till the end. This story will touch your heart. Subscribe for more inspiring stories. The afternoon sun burned hot over the empty highway. Cars rushed past, each chasing its own destination, while one shiny black Mercedes stood stranded on the side of the road, its front tire flat and its owner pacing beside it. Frustration written all over his wrinkled face. Harold Bennett was a man the world called successful, a self-made millionaire, known for his sharp suits and sharper business sense. But at this moment, none of that mattered. His phone had no signal, his hands were trembling, and for the first time in years, he felt helpless. He muttered under his breath, "Of all days, why today?" As he kicked the tire in anger, sweat trickled down his forehead. The highway stretched endlessly in both directions, but not a single car stopped. Then, through the shimmering heat, he saw a figure walking slowly along the roadside, a boy, maybe 13 or 14, with a backpack hanging loose over his shoulder. His clothes were dusty, his sneakers worn out, but his eyes carried something different: calmness, warmth, and quiet strength. "Sir, do you need help?" the boy asked, his voice polite but confident. Harold raised an eyebrow. "I doubt you can help, son. It's a flat tire, and I'm waiting for roadside service, if my phone ever decides to work again." The boy smiled. "Well, I've fixed a few bikes and even my uncle's old truck. Maybe I can take a look?" Something about the boy's tone, respectful yet fearless, made Harold step aside. "Go ahead, then. Be my guest?" The boy knelt beside the car, rolled up his sleeves, and examined the tire. His dark skin glistened with sweat as he worked with quiet focus, loosening bolts and checking the spare. His movements were steady, practiced, the kind that came from someone used to solving problems on his own. Harold watched silently, surprised. He had seen hundreds of employees work for him, but none with such natural determination. Within minutes, the boy had the spare tire in place and stood up, wiping his hands on his jeans. "All done, sir," he said with a smile that could melt anyone's pride. Harold reached into his wallet, pulled out a $100 bill, and held it out. "Here, young man. You've earned this." But the boy shook his head. "No, sir. I didn't help you for money. My mom says when you see someone in trouble, you do what's right, not what pays." Harold froze. For a moment, the world went quiet, only the wind whispering across the highway. The boy turned to leave, adjusting his backpack. "Wait!" Harold called out, but the boy simply waved and kept walking toward the fading sunlight. The old man stood there speechless, the $100 bill fluttering in his hand. Something inside him shifted, a feeling he hadn't known in years. He didn't know the boy's name, but something told him this encounter wasn't over. That night, Harold sat alone in his mansion, a home so large it echoed with silence. The marble floors reflected the dim, golden light of the chandelier above him. Dinner sat untouched on the table, but his mind wasn't on the food. It was on that boy. He replayed the scene in his head, the confident way the boy had worked, the smile, the refusal of money. "No, sir, I didn't help you for money." Those words had hit harder than any deal gone wrong, any loss he'd ever faced. Harold had spent his entire life building wealth, chasing numbers, and winning. He knew every trick in business, but not once could he remember doing something purely out of kindness. The realization unsettled him. He got up, walked to the grand window, and looked out at the dark horizon. "Who was that kid?" he muttered to himself. The next morning, he couldn't shake the feeling. So he did something spontaneous, something completely unlike him. He got in his car and drove back to the same highway where he'd met the boy. The road stretched endlessly, but there was no sign of the young helper. Harold stopped by a nearby diner, walked in, and asked the waitress, "Excuse me, have you seen a young black boy? Maybe 13, 14, skinny, short hair, wearing a backpack?" The woman thought for a moment, then nodded. "That sounds like Jamal. Lives with his mama near Riverbend. Sweet kid. Always helping folks around here?" "Riverbend," Harold repeated quietly. "Thank you." The directions led him to a quiet part of town, the kind of neighborhood he hadn't been to in decades. Houses were small, some run down, but there was laughter in the air. Kids played in the streets, their joy louder than any luxury. He found the house, a small faded blue home with a wooden porch. Flowers bloomed in tin cans beside the steps. Harold hesitated before knocking. The door opened, and a woman in her 40s appeared. She looked surprised but kind. "Can I help you, sir?" "Yes," Harold said, clearing his throat. "My name's Harold Bennett. I met your son yesterday, Jamal, I believe. He helped me with my car." Her eyes softened, and a proud smile appeared. "That sounds like my boy, always helping strangers, even when he should be home doing homework." Harold chuckled lightly, feeling the first genuine warmth he'd felt in a long time. He wouldn't take any money from me. I just wanted to thank him properly. "Would you like to wait for him?" she asked, stepping aside. "He's out back fixing the fence again." Harold stepped into the small home. The furniture was old but spotless. On the wall hung family pictures, a young Jamal with his mother at church, at school, at community events. There was love in every frame. When Jamal walked in from the backyard and saw Harold, his eyes widened. "Mr. Bennett, what are you doing here?" Harold smiled. "Looking for you? You left me thinking all night, young man." Jamal frowned playfully. "I hope I didn't cause trouble." "Quite the opposite," Harold said, his voice softer now. "You reminded me of something I'd forgotten a long time ago." The boy tilted his head curiously. "What's that, sir?" "That kindness," Harold said, "isn't about what you get, but what you give." And for the first time in many years, the old millionaire felt something deep, something close to peace. Jamal's mother smiled warmly and said, "We were just about to eat. Would you care to join us, Mr. Bennett? It's nothing fancy, but you're welcome." Harold hesitated. He couldn't remember the last time someone had invited him to a home-cooked meal without expecting something in return. In his world, every gesture had a price, but there was something genuine in her tone that he couldn't ignore. "I'd be honored," he finally said. The kitchen was small, but full of life. A single window let in golden sunlight that glowed across the wooden table. The smell of baked cornbread filled the air. Jamal's mother moved gracefully, setting out dishes of rice, beans, and roasted chicken. "Please sit," she said with a kind smile. Harold took a seat, adjusting his expensive watch unconsciously, suddenly aware of how out of place it looked here, among chipped plates and old utensils. But the moment Jamal sat down beside him, laughing about something from school, the discomfort faded. "So, Jamal," Harold asked as they ate, "do you always help strangers?" The boy grinned. "When I can. Mom says we may not have a lot, but we can still give kindness. She says it's the one thing that always grows when you share it." Harold felt those words like a soft punch to the chest. He glanced at Jamal's mother, who smiled humbly and said, "It's how I was raised. Life's been hard since Jamal's dad passed, but we've got what matters." "I'm sorry for your loss," Harold said sincerely. "Thank you," she replied quietly. "He was a good man. Worked in construction. Jamal takes after him, always fixing, always helping." Harold looked at Jamal, whose hands were calloused from chores most kids his age wouldn't bother with. The boy's eyes, though, were full of light, a kind of hope that money couldn't buy. They talked and laughed through lunch. Harold found himself sharing stories from his youth, growing up poor, working odd jobs, saving every dollar until success finally came. He realized he hadn't spoken so freely in years. When the meal ended, Jamal's mother stood and said softly, "You're welcome here any time. Mr. Bennett, you remind me of my father, quiet but kind." Harold smiled faintly, his eyes moist. "Thank you. You've given me more than you realize." As he stepped outside to leave, Jamal followed him to the porch. "Mr. Bennett," the boy said, rubbing his hands nervously, "I never asked. What do you do?" "I used to run a business," Harold replied. "Big offices, fancy meetings. But lately, it doesn't mean much." Jamal tilted his head, puzzled. "Why not?" Harold looked out over the neighborhood, the cracked pavement, the kids laughing, the life buzzing in every corner. "Because somewhere along the way I forgot what really matters." The boy frowned slightly. "You can remember again, though. My mom says it's never too late to start being who you were meant to be." Harold chuckled softly, emotion thick in his throat. "You and your mom sure have a way with words." Jamal grinned. "She says wisdom's free, might as well share it." That simple moment, standing on the porch of a small house, became something Harold would never forget. For the first time in decades, he felt alive. As he drove home, the city lights seemed dimmer, his mansion quieter, his achievements smaller. But his heart, it felt heavier, fuller, and strangely hopeful. That night, Harold sat at his desk and whispered to himself, "I want to help that boy. Not out of charity, but because he helped me first." And from that moment, a plan began to form, one that would change Jamal's family's life forever. The next morning, Harold woke up before sunrise, something he hadn't done in years. His home was silent, the kind of silence that echoed through its marble halls. He stood by the window, watching the first golden rays of morning touch the city skyline. He thought of Jamal, that young black boy with dusty shoes and a pure heart. A boy who'd asked for nothing yet given him everything. Harold felt something awaken inside him, a fire he thought he'd lost long ago. He didn't just want to thank Jamal anymore. He wanted to change his life. He grabbed his phone and started making calls. Old colleagues, construction companies, friends from the business world. One by one he contacted them, asking for materials, labor, and favors. Not for profit this time, but for purpose. By afternoon, his assistant walked into his study, confused. "Mr. Bennett, you've made 27 calls today. May I ask what this project is about?" Harold smiled gently. "It's about repaying a debt, not in money, but in gratitude." The assistant nodded slowly, unsure what to say. 2 days later, Harold's black Mercedes pulled up again in front of Jamal's small blue house. This time, he wasn't alone. Behind him came trucks filled with lumber, paint, tools, and a small crew of workers. Jamal was outside fixing his bicycle when he saw the convoy approaching. His eyes widened. "Mr. Bennett, what's all this?" Harold stepped out of the car, his suit jacket fluttering slightly in the wind. "This," he said with a smile, "is me returning a favor." Jamal's mother came running out, wiping her hands on her apron. "Mr. Bennett, what's going on?" Harold took off his hat respectfully. "Ma'am, I know you didn't ask for help, but you raised a remarkable young man, one who reminded me what kindness means. So I'd like to make a few improvements to your home. Consider it a small thank you." Her eyes widened in disbelief. "Oh, no, sir, we couldn't possibly—" He held up a gentle hand. "You've already done more for me than you know. Please, allow me this." For a moment, silence filled the air. Then Jamal's mother's lips trembled into a soft, tearful smile. "If it means that much to you, thank you." Harold nodded once, turning to the workers. "All right, folks, let's give this family the home they deserve." The crew got to work immediately. Boards were measured, paint cans opened, and laughter filled the street. Neighbors peeked out from their windows, whispering in disbelief as the old blue house slowly began to transform. Jamal stood in awe, watching the activity unfold. "Mr. Bennett, you didn't have to do this," he said quietly. Harold crouched down so their eyes met. "Jamal, sometimes the richest people are the ones who give when they have the least. You taught me that. Now it's my turn to give back." Jamal's eyes shone with emotion. "I didn't think one small thing could make such a big difference." Harold smiled warmly. "It always starts small, son. The biggest changes in life usually do." And as hammers echoed and paint brushed across old wood, something beautiful began to bloom. Not just a rebuilt home, but a bond that would last forever. Days turned into weeks, and the little blue house that once stood tired and broken was now a place of beauty and warmth. The cracked porch had been rebuilt, the peeling paint replaced with a rich golden hue that glowed in the sunlight, and the yard, once dry and barren, now bloomed with flowers. Jamal couldn't stop smiling. Every day after school he would rush home just to watch the workers build, paint, and create. He'd carry water for them, help lift small planks, and listen to their stories. For him, it wasn't just a renovation. It was hope taking shape right before his eyes. Harold came by every few days, watching the progress. But something strange was happening inside him. The more time he spent with Jamal and his family, the less he cared about money, meetings, or business deals. He found joy in laughter, in the smell of fresh paint, and in the way Jamal's eyes lit up at every small improvement. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Harold sat on the new porch with Jamal. The sky was painted with orange and purple streaks, and the air smelled of sawdust and fresh wood. "Mr. Bennett," Jamal said softly, "why are you doing all this for us?" Harold leaned back in his chair, staring at the sunset. "Because once I forgot what it felt like to care. I had everything, money, cars, houses, but I didn't have peace. Then a young black boy with nothing to gain stopped to help me when I needed it most. You reminded me that humanity isn't measured by wealth, but by kindness." Jamal looked down shyly. "I just did what anyone should do," Harold smiled. "Maybe, but not everyone does. Most people drive past. You stopped." There was a moment of silence between them. Comfortable, meaningful silence. The kind that doesn't need words. Then Harold reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope. "I've been thinking," he said. "You're a smart young man, Jamal. I don't want your talent to fade away here. So I've set up a scholarship fund in your name. It'll cover your school, books, and college, or everything." Jamal froze, eyes wide. "For me? You mean I can go to college?" Harold nodded with a soft smile. "You will. You're going to make something of yourself, and not just for you, but for every kid who thinks they can't." Tears welled in Jamal's eyes. He tried to speak, but no words came out. He just hugged Harold tightly. For a man who once thought money could buy anything, that hug meant more than every dollar he'd ever earned. From that evening on, the two became inseparable. Harold didn't see a poor boy anymore. He saw a reflection of himself, the boy he once was before life hardened him. And Jamal didn't just see a millionaire, he saw a mentor, a man who taught him that true success isn't about what you own, but what you give. And as they sat there watching the stars rise, both knew something had changed, not just their lives, but their hearts. Years passed. Seasons changed. The little boy who once knelt by a broken-down car had grown into a young man. Jamal was no longer the dusty black boy from the old neighborhood. He was now standing on a stage wearing a graduation gown, with his name called to loud applause. "Jamal Carter, Bachelor of Civil Engineering, with honors." The crowd erupted in cheers. His mother wept in the front row, hands trembling as she clapped, and beside her sat Harold Bennett, older now, slower in his steps, but with a smile so full of pride it could light the entire hall. As Jamal took his diploma, he glanced toward Harold. Their eyes met, one filled with gratitude, the other with quiet joy. After the ceremony, Jamal ran to Harold and hugged him tightly. "You kept your promise," he whispered. Harold chuckled softly, his voice raspy. "No, son, you kept yours. You didn't just change your life, you changed mine." Jamal smiled, tears glistening. "You gave me a chance when no one else would. How can I ever repay that?" The old man placed a hand on his shoulder. "By doing the same for someone else one day. That's how kindness works. It moves forward." That night Harold sat by his window again, watching the stars like he used to. But this time he wasn't alone. Jamal was there too, helping him adjust his chair, bringing him tea, laughing softly as they shared stories. "Funny, isn't it?" Harold said. "One day I had a flat tire, and it turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me." Jamal smiled. "Life's funny like that. Sometimes the smallest detours lead to the most beautiful destinations." Harold looked out at the city lights, his eyes glistening. "Promise me one thing, Jamal. Anything. Never forget where you came from. Keep helping others, not because they can repay you, but because you know what it's like to need a helping hand." Jamal nodded, his voice firm. "I promise." A soft smile spread across Harold's face. "That's all I needed to hear." Weeks later, Harold peacefully passed away in his sleep. But his legacy didn't end there. At the funeral, Jamal stood before a crowd of hundreds, community members, former workers, and even children from the neighborhood. He spoke with strength in his voice and love in his heart. "Mr. Bennett wasn't just a millionaire," he said. "He was proof that one act of kindness can ripple through generations. He taught me that wealth fades, but goodness never dies." Years later, Jamal started the Bennett Foundation, helping underprivileged kids get an education, just like he once dreamed of. And every year, on the anniversary of the day he helped fix that flat tire, he'd visit the old road, place a flower there, and whisper, "Thank you, Mr. Bennett, for seeing me, for believing in me, and for reminding the world that kindness is the greatest fortune of all." If this story touched your heart, don't just scroll away, spread kindness. Hit like, share, and subscribe to Facts Psychology and Motivational for more true life-changing stories that prove one act of kindness can change everything.